Hey pirate fans around the world. This is Was There a Real Jack Sparrow? A shrewd, rum-charmed trickster captain. Didn't spring from Hollywood. He's a composite of real pirates. And tonight we'll prove how the legends map onto history. Jack Sparrow from Pirates of the Caribbean feels too specific to be pure invention, and that is the point of departure. The question is simple. Who were the real seafarers, whose lives, habits, and legends fed the creation of a captain who jokes his way out of danger and slips through the fingers of empire? Viewers are about to hear the candidates, the evidence, what the films captured, what they stretched, and a clear verdict at the end. This is not trivia. It changes how the golden age of piracy is understood, because it reveals the pattern beneath the stories, how charm, law, commerce, and survival braided together on the open sea. Before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really enjoy and want to fall asleep with pirate stories whenever you want. The big question comes first, and the plan is straightforward. A real Jack Sparrow is not one man. It is a repeating shape, a captain who wins with wit, more than with cannon, who treats luck like a tool, and who negotiates with governors while stealing their ships. The method is simple and calm. First, profiles will be laid out for the strongest historical contenders. Next, their traits will be matched to moments in the films. The compass that does not point north, the showman's swagger, the sideways deals with officials, the slippery escapes through crowded ports. Finally, those traits will be weighed with sources and a verdict will be reached. One primary inspiration, two strong secondary contributors, and a handful of traits borrowed from others. Step by step, the mask will come off the character so the real faces behind it can be seen. To make things clear early, here is a fast map that ties film traits to historical counterparts and hints at where proof lives. Trickster leadership, seen whenever the movie captain wins without firing a shot. Links to commanders who preferred misdirection over open battle. Their proof rests in depositions, letters, and early histories describing smooth talk, surprise, and sudden defections. Mutiny survival and the art of the comeback point to captains who lost ships or crews, then returned with new names or alliances. Sartorial flair, beads, bright coats, a hat chosen as much for theater as for shade, relates to pirates whose look was part of their tactics, intimidating enemies or boosting morale. Democratic crews and coded rules appear again and again in ship articles from the era, and will be shown in plain language. Opportunistic alliances, brief moments, where a pirate becomes a privateer or works with a governor. Sit-in pardons, proclamations, and court testimony. With that map in mind, comparisons to Tortuga barroom chaos, parley scenes in candlelit rooms, crew votes on deck, and the smoky council at Shipwreck Cove will land with clarity. The first strong candidate steps onto the stage, Jack Ward, also known as John Ward, and later as Yusuf Rice, after a dramatic turn in North Africa. The name Jack itself rings like a bell for the film character, but it is more than coincidence. Ward developed a reputation for sudden moves and daring thefts. Quick strikes that made observers describe him as cunning rather than simply violent. The story opens on the coasts of the late 16th and early 17th centuries, where he cut his teeth as a privateer and then crossed a line into full piracy. Ward did not always rely on brute force. He was known for taking vessels with clever timing and for reinventing himself when pressure rose. Contemporary accounts give him a showman's glow, and later pamphlets amplified it, until he resembled an almost mythical rogue. Importantly, Ward's life included cross-cultural dealings after he reached North Africa and took a new name. That ability to shift identities and operate in more than one world mirrors the film captain's slippery diplomacy. One moment bargaining with a governor, the next raising a toast in a foreign port where the law's hand grows soft at night. Viewers can picture the vibe. The camera glides across a harbor lit by lanterns. A captain who looks like the sea itself has adopted him, walks past a row of traders, and the negotiation begins before anyone speaks. Jack Ward's origin story shows the loop between war and piracy. Many pirates began with legal permission, Letters of marque allowing them to harass enemy ships during conflict. When those letters expired or terms grew strict, some kept the habit and lost the paperwork. Ward's biggest coups involved capturing well-armed vessels, then using them to expand his reach. Each success attracted talent. Each new crew brought new complications. Ward's legend was magnified by enemies who needed a villain for their readers, and by admirers who loved a stylish rule-breaker. When the films showed a captain making friends in the unlikeliest corners of the map, or speaking softly while the plan clicked into place, they echoed the Ward line, charm as a tactic, identity as a costume, and local relationships as a net stronger than rope. The second candidate is Calico Jack Rackham. He matters for simple reasons that even a child could hold on to. His nickname, Calico, came from his clothing. He liked flair. He captained small, quick ships that relied on agility. His story tangled with two names that light up pirate history: Anne Bonny and Mary Red, partners whose presence on deck unsettled rigid expectations of the time. Rackham's rise involved opportunism and daring, but his captures were not always grand set-piece battles. They were moves by a fox rather than a bear. His downfall came after a series of risky decisions, proof that style can boost courage, but cannot hold back a storm forever. As for iconography, his flag, often shown as a skull over two crossed cutlasses, teaches how branding worked before the term existed. It was a message made of cloth: surrender now, avoid a fight. When the films dress their captain with ornaments and give him lines that turn danger into theater, they tap the Rackham vein. The outlaw lovers who banter across decks find a mirror in Rackham's circle. The wardrobe that says, "I am not a gray sailor in a gray world," reflects the same choice fashion as signal and shield. A third candidate arrives with a different energy. Bartholomew Roberts, called Black Bart. He fits because he blended charisma with discipline and ran ships by a code. He raided with audacity, and yet he looked like a gentleman who might have worn lace to church. Roberts made a craft of performance, but he did not confuse charm with chaos. On his vessels, rules were clear, articles were accepted by crews, and the share system, how loot was split, gave order to the risk everyone took. The code punished theft among shipmates, protected rest time, and spelled out compensation for injury. In short, he made liberty livable. Roberts' death became legend. A cannon shot ended him, and his crew honored him even as they lost control. In the films, when the pirate code is spoken of with reverence and humor, when a captain holds a council or asks for a vote, the trail leads back to Roberts and others like him, who were both performers and administrators of floating societies. To keep viewers oriented, a quick run through the golden age of piracy helps. It bloomed from the mid-17th to the early 18th century. Wars created trained sailors. Then peace sent many ashore with few options. Colonial trade changed the map, and treasure fleets crossed long, exposed routes. Privateering made piracy feel close. The skills were the same. The targets were similar. The difference was paperwork and timing. Atlantic circuits linked Europe, Africa, and the Americas, and ports from the Caribbean to the Carolinas to the Barbary Coast became revolving doors where traders, officials, and rogues bumped shoulders. When the films show Port Royal, Nassau, or Tortuga as stages where rule and misrule dance, they anchor in this reality, places where tide charts, gossip, and politics mattered as much as wind. The larger forces matter because they created the resistance that a sparrow-like figure would push against. Crowns directed navies. The Spanish moved silver and gold from the New World. The English built an empire where charters and monopolies shaped trade. The East India Company emerges here as a character in its own right. A corporation with cannons, laws, and paperwork that could grind like a millstone. Jurisdiction games gave clever captains room to slip through cracks. A bay controlled by one flag today, another flag tomorrow. A court in the Caribbean that looked kindly on a man who could help a governor, while a court in London sharpened its teeth for the same man. Letters of marque turned pirates into privateers, then back into pirates when treaties changed. So when the films place a powdered official across the table from a smiling captain, Or when a document becomes more dangerous than a pistol, they reflect the real world where empires accidentally incubated piracy. Life on board explains why pirate chaos could include a quiet kind of order. Captains were often elected. Shares were set before a voyage. Punishments existed, but so did protections, like compensation for lost limbs. Food was simple and sometimes grim. Salted meat, hard biscuit, occasional fresh fruit when luck allowed. Water soured. Grog, a mix of water and spirits, was not just a party in a cup. It kept bad water drinkable and raised morale after brine and heat had done their worst. Disease stalked everyone. A surgeon could be a miracle. More often a crew made do with experience and grit. In storms, every hand mattered. The democratic habit came from necessity. A ship moved only when the crew pulled as one. When the films show a vote on deck or a parley under lantern light, they do not invent this dynamic. They frame it for viewers who have never felt a deck roll under their feet. The camera now finds another contender for the Sparrow composite, Henry Avery, also written as Avery. He is a legend because of one towering heist, the capture of a rich Mughal ship, which triggered an international hunt and a new wave of fear. Avery then disappeared into rumor. That vanishing act fed the folk hero template, a captain who pulled off a stroke so bold that the world itself could not catch him. Sparrow's mythic treasure hauls, and the sense that he slips away when the story ends, owe a debt to this pattern. Avery's tale shows how a single raid could reshape diplomacy, because the damage done to a wealthy empire created pressure all the way back to European governments. It is a reminder that piracy was not just a local crime. It was a global event whenever the wrong ship fell into the wrong hands. Charles Vane enters as a contrast. He fits the composite in small ways. He escaped tight spots and captured prizes, but his reputation leans toward defiance and volatility. He is an edge in the picture, not the center. Vane refused pardons and scorched bridges. His story runs hot, then burns down in a public execution. Comparing Vane with Sparrow's playful cunning helps a viewer see the boundaries of the composite. Sparrow's survival depends on charm, negotiation, and timing. Vane's story shows what happens when a captain leans only on fire. Another necessary figure is Edward Teach, known as Blackbeard. He does not become Jack Sparrow, but he adds a vital strand: theatrical intimidation. Blackbeard braided slow-burning fuses into his beard to create a halo of smoke, a living figurehead that petrified foes at first sight. He masterminded blockades and used fear as a weapon. The films include him outright in later entries, but even before that they borrowed his principle, stagecraft at sea, where Blackbeard is the performance of terror, Sparrow is the performance of charm. But both understand the audience. A crew that feels its captain has a plan, holds together. An enemy that believes the captain will do the impossible, starts to think about surrender. Intimidation and wit meet on the same deck. A calm note on where these images come from will help viewers trust what follows. The trickster captain archetype was built by dozens of sources, some sober, some breathless. Pamphlets told stories to sell copies. Newspaper reports were swift, but not always precise. Depositions and trials recorded who said what about whom, with motives tangled in self-preservation. Early histories, written by men who were close to events, but not always sympathetic to pirates, assembled these pieces into bigger narratives. Over time, a composite pirate superstar emerged. A figure who could smile at the noose and turn it into a necklace in a paragraph. That pipeline event to report to embellishment, to popular culture, to modern film, can be traced without fuss. When the films borrow the durable beats, parley, codes, flamboyance, secret havens, they draw from a pool of stories shaped by both truth and the need to sell a good yarn. With that in place, the ports and havens become more than backdrops. Tortuga worked as a stage for refits, recruitment, and release valves. Port Royal, before disaster struck it, was a busy market where stolen goods could become respectable overnight with the right signatures. Nassau became a nest for pirates who treated the harbor like their communal living room. On the other side of the sea, North African corsair hubs offered safe water and new identities. Each port had fences for stolen cargo, taverns where information flowed faster than ale, informants, local officials willing to look away for a price, and shipyards that could hide a refit under a different name. A sparrow-like figure could move through these places as if stepping from one stage set to the next, with the same supporting cast: a weary clerk, an eager young deckhand, a wary shopkeeper, a governor balancing power like a tray of glass. Relics and props then find their place in the real world. The famous compass that does not point north works as a symbol for desire. In reality, navigational tools mattered deeply. But a captain's true north was often profit, safety, or a promise made to a crew. Flags were messages. Different colors meant different offers. Mercy if a ship surrendered, none if it did not. Pistols and cutlasses were common tools of the trade, while coats and hats served as both protection and presentation. Trinkets had value beyond money. They could mark a pact, a memory, or a debt. The films dressed their world with care, mixing authenticity and exaggeration. The Black Pearl's sleek darkness is more mood than museum piece. But the feeling it evokes, the ship as a home with a mind of its own, echoes how crews talked about beloved vessels. Myths and the supernatural flowed naturally among sailors who faced danger daily. Omens at sea, birds' shapes in the waves, strange lights were ways to read the world when instruments failed or the night felt heavy. Cursed gold, ghost ships, guardians of treasure, these tales did not make pirates irrational. They made them human. When a man's life depends on wind and rope, it is easy to give the ocean a personality. The film's Aztec curse, their Davy Jones with a ledger of souls, and their Kraken are big, loud versions of quiet stories told under canvas. Real sailors spoke of monsters, but also of luck and fate in simple terms that a child could understand. Myths gave meaning to risk. They made courage feel guided, not random. Law and pursuit tightened the frame again. Admiralty courts held sway, where ordinary juries did not. Informants were gold. Pardons and proclamations were used to break crews apart by inviting some to come in from the cold. Propaganda turned a captured pirate into a lesson for others. Public executions, cheap prints, sermons. The cat-and-mouse game kept leaders clever. A sparrow-like captain needed to know when to take a pardon, when to burn it, and how to make an enemy think he was already gone. When the films show the ritual of clemency, the grin across a negotiation table or the grim scaffolds at a harbor's edge, they reflect a world where law was both net and theater. Women in piracy deserve clear space in this story. Anne Bonny and Mary Ridd become part of the Rackham thread, but they also stand on their own as proof that ships were not sealed against women's presence. Disguises occurred, work was shared, courage did not ask for permission. The legal system treated them unevenly, and yet their stories confirm and bend expectations at once. In the films, Elizabeth Swann's trajectory from courtly space to open water echoes this truth from a different angle. Ability is not a uniform, it is a set of choices and risks. Money engines powered everything beneath the songs. A captured cargo had to be turned into cash. Fences and markets handled that conversion. Wartime made privateering legal. Peacetime made it suspicious. Some captains could pivot back and forth depending on who signed their papers. The opportunistic diplomat prospered by keeping doors open on both sides. The film's backroom deals and official double crosses are not exaggerations of character so much as reflections of a business model that lived in a gray zone. At this point, the scene can shift into forensic mode, movie moments versus their real-world roots. One iconic escape through a crowded port, with a captain joking while danger closes in, has a real counterpart in reports of pirates ducking into coves and markets where allies delayed pursuers with paperwork or confusion. The film's compass that points toward desire is a loud metaphor for a quieter truth. Successful captains understood the desires of others and guided decisions toward them. Greedy officials, cautious merchants, ambitious crewmen. The comic parley scene, where a complex rule is invoked at the perfect time, grows from ship articles and traditions about negotiation. Pirates valued predictable rules on board because they reduced fights over shares and treatment. The scene where a flamboyant coat unsettles a room is a reminder that clothing carries meaning. In the age of sail, rank, wealth, and foreign contacts could be read in fabric. A finale where a ship seems to act with its own will speaks to the real way crews loved their vessels, giving them nicknames and moods, treating them like friends who could forgive a mistake if shown respect. The legacy section flows naturally. Popular culture reshapes history, then loops back. A film not only reflects old sources, it changes museum labels, school lessons, and tourism. A visitor who meets Jack Sparrow on screen goes to a port museum and suddenly cares about Jack Ward, Calico Jack, or Black Bart Roberts. That interest funds new exhibits, and those exhibits frame the next generation's imagination. The loop continues. Before the verdict can be given, a short framework explains how it will be reached. Criteria include linkage by name and era, personality traits and public performance, career arc and tactics, relationships with power, and the afterlife of the myth in print and memory. Each candidate gets weighed across these points. The goal is not courtroom certainty. It is a clean, reasonable call that respects what can be known and what remains cloudy. Now the verdict arrives in a calm voice that a listener can trust while drifting towards sleep. The real Jack Sparrow is not single. Jack Ward takes the lead for the name, the reinventions, and the showman's diplomacy across culture. Calico Jack contributes the fashion signal and the intimate circle that reshaped expectations. And Bonnie and Mary Ridd, plus a quick ship style, Black Bart Roberts, adds the code-driven stagecraft of a leader who ruled by rules and charisma. Henry Every supplies the big myth of the vanishing trick after a giant heist. Blackbeard lends the principle that performance is a weapon. There is one primary inspiration, Ward, two strong secondary contributors, Rackham and Roberts, and specific traits borrowed from the others. What the films nail is the idea that a captain survives by reading people as deftly as he reads tides, and that law and crime can shake hands in the same harbor. What they invent is the fantasy machinery, the cursed tokens, the undead bargains, and the compression of decades of stories into the path of one man who never loses his hat. A brief lightning round. Tidy's loose threads. Did sailors truly fear a kraken? Many believed in monsters, but most feared storms and hunger more. Was keel hauling common? The image is famous. The practice was rare and more associated with certain navies than with pirate crews. Did parley exist as a rule? Negotiation did, and respect for a flag of truce could save lives. But it was not a magic spell. Did Tortuga hold elections on deck? Many pirate crews voted, though the details varied ship to ship. Did pirates bury treasure? Usually they spent it. Burying was uncommon, and made better stories than strategies. Did a code always protect the weak? It tried to regulate risk and reward. Fairness and cruelty still lived side by side. Did rum flow all day? Rations existed, but water management and discipline often controlled the cup. Did pirates sing shanties nightly? Songs were common, but hard work set the rhythm of most days. For those who want more, period histories and trial records are the best start, along with sailor narratives that mix grit and humor. Modern scholarship adds context in plain terms. A curious mind can search by the names heard tonight and find a shelf's worth of reading. A gentle sign-off brings the journey to a quiet shore. The truth behind Jack Sparrow is brighter than a single face. He is a pattern, wit under pressure, performance as survival, law used as a tool, and home found in the sound of water against a hull. The next calm sea will hold a fresh story, perhaps the real Port Royal after the earthquake, or the tangled path of a pardon that saved a captain for a season. For now, the night can close with the image of a lantern swaying in a cabin, a chart spread on a table, and a compass pointing not to the north, but to whatever a person wants most when the world is wide and the wind is steady. The night opens again with calm water and steady wind, and the story deepens with patient detail. The composite seen behind the name Jack Sparrow becomes clearer when each thread is traced from dockside rumor to written page to modern myth, so the next stretch follows the method with care and unhurried rhythm, like a ship making way on a long, even swell. Jack Ward's life offers a generous path into this composite because it shows how quick thinking, reinvention, and cross-cultural fluency formed a survival kit stronger than gunpowder. Ward began as a privateer during a season when European powers licensed daring mariners to harass enemy trade. When licenses dried up, some captains drifted across a line that was thin in practice even if it looked sharp on paper. Ward crossed it decisively. Reports describe him stealing a fine ship in a bold stroke, slipping away to North Africa, and setting up a new base where Mediterranean politics could shield him. Governors in North African ports, balancing their own calculations, found that a talented seafarer was a useful neighbor so long as he kept the peace locally and directed his raiding elsewhere. In Tunis, Ward entered a new chapter. He adopted another name, Yusuf Reis, and navigated a world where identity could be practical rather than fixed. This was not a trick played on the world for drama. It was what survival demanded, a sober adaptation to the fact that a harbor could be either a courtroom or a sanctuary depending on who wrote the rules that month. Quick fact, one of the most telling signals is how enemies wrote about Ward. Even when they condemned him, they could not help but paint him as resourceful, persuasive, and theatrical. Those descriptions are not accidents. They reveal a leader who understood that reputation traveled faster than a sail could carry a hull. If a captain looked lucky, enemies hesitated. If he looked doomed, crews drifted. Ward's flair was practical. A captain who dressed like he expected to win often did win, because the first battles at sea were fought in the heads of both crews. A bridge to the films is easy to see here. Whenever the on-screen Jack leans into a room with a half-smile and turns a meeting into a performance, Ward's ghost nods from the wings. A scene where a deal with a foreign official rests on humor as much as on gold reflects the way Ward managed his life in Tunis, mixing obligation, gift-giving, and plausible deniability into a fabric that felt strong to all sides. No supernatural compass is needed to explain this. The true north was always the art of reading others. The Rackham thread adds the color that distinguishes a face from a silhouette. John Rackham's nickname, Calico Jack, came from cloth, and that matters. Clothing did not only shield skin from sun and spray. Clothing sold a message. Rackham's taste for patterned fabric told crews and rivals that he lived as a character on purpose. It is not a childish detail. Maritime life trained men to scan others for quick signs. The cut of a coat, the quality of a weapon, the confidence in a stride. Rackham leaned on that literacy. And then there were the partners who stand so bright that even those who rarely read history know their names. Anne Bonny and Mary Ridd. Their presence did more than add spice to a story. It unsettled static expectations and proved that talent and courage are not uniforms handed out by a Navy clerk. Accounts differ in tone, some eager to sensationalize, others cool and careful. But they share a consistent portrait. The trio moved with ease between quiet planning and sudden action, and the small ships they favored acted as force multipliers in shallow waters where lumbering warships hated to follow. In a film, this becomes a montage of nimble maneuvers and nighttime landings. In life, it was a set of practices refined by trial and error. Heads up on this. Rackham's downfall is as instructive as his rise. It shows that a composite like Jack Sparrow is built from best moments rather than full lives. Rackham made choices that narrowed options. He enjoyed the stagecraft, but fell short of the cold accounting that keeps a crew safe when pressure grows. That contrast helps a viewer understand why the composite selects traits like flair and partnership from Rackham, but borrows the survival math from someone else. Black Bart Roberts brings that math. Roberts ran ships with articles that looked like thin law codes, and crews accepted them because predictability is a precious bomb when days start with hard biscuit and end with repairs in darkness. Articles defined shares, set penalties for theft among shipmates, regulated drinking, and promised compensation for injury. This was not a romantic republic, it was risk management. Roberts also believed in presentation. He dressed with a gentleman's polish and carried himself as though he owed the world good posture. That posture was not vanity. It was theater tuned to a crew's psychology. When a captain looked calm, the night lost its teeth. Consider 7 fast frames of context that make all these lives make sense. First, sailors trained in war reached peace with nothing to do and debts to pay. Second, the Atlantic turned into a highway, and every highway invites toll collectors who don't ask permission. Third, privateering blurred into piracy once letters of marque expired or were disrespected in a far harbor. Fourth, treasure routes concentrated wealth into predictable tracks. The Spanish silver fleets most famously, and predictable tracks create favorite hunting grounds. Fifth, colonial governors sometimes tolerated or even courted disruptive captains when it hurt an enemy more than it hurt local order. Sixth, markets needed goods, and stolen sugar, dye wood, or spices could become honest enough with a few stamps and the right handshake. Seventh, news traveled slowly and badly, so a man could be a pardoned friend in one port and a hunted felon in the next, simply because the mail lagged. In the films, when a smiling captain seems to live between the ticks of a clock, those frames are the gears inside the watch. The East India Company needs a quiet paragraph because the films turn it into a suited antagonist with a desk full of contracts, and reality nods in agreement. The company held power like a small nation. It moved goods, wrote rules, and sometimes fired guns from ships that looked like merchants but fought like soldiers. To a captain who lived by charm and speed, the company represented a different kind of weather, slow pressure that could sour the entire season. A clever captain could not outgun a partnership between a king and a monopoly, but he could move around the edges. Papers, bribes, and clever timing loosened knots that cannon could not cut. Daily life on a pirate vessel deserves a long, gentle look, because without it the rest floats above the surface. The workday followed watches. Men rotated between duty and brief rest to keep a ship alive 24 hours at a time. Tasks multiplied: trimming sail, repairing cordage, scraping hulls to remove growth that slowed speed, sewing torn canvas, tending the stove, checking the bilge, cleaning weapons, and minding the helm. Navigation relied on dead reckoning, simple instruments, and memory. A competent quartermaster and navigator were more valuable than a flashy deck gun. Food was survival first, pleasure second. Salted beef or pork could lean toward leather. Hardtack could hide weevils. Water turned stale. Quick fact: grog diluted spirits into water not to inspire songs, but to improve safety, morale, and hydration. Citrus fruit, when found, could save lives by fighting scurvy, but it was not always available and not always understood in time. A ship's surgeon, when present, stitched wounds and sawed limbs with grim speed. More often, experience and superstition split the duties in a crew that did what it could. Rumor said pirates were dirty. Many worked hard to keep clean, because filth bred sickness. The ship itself was a living thing to them, and nothing reveals love for a home like constant upkeep. With that groundwork, Henry Every's heist can be seen without exaggeration. The capture of an immensely rich Mughal ship did not only enrich the crew, it yanked on diplomatic cords that reached palaces. News of the attack triggered outrage far away from the deck where swords flashed. Suddenly, the actions of one ship threatened trade routes, relationships, and profits, large enough to bend policy. An international manhunt followed, and Every's vanishing act proved that the ocean had more hiding places than a map suggests. A composite like Jack Sparrow pulls from this: the sense that a single brilliant act can echo longer than the actor's name survives, and the trick of disappearing at the right time becomes part of the myth. Charles Vane's season. reads like a stern caution. He refused pardons that might have given him time to breathe, and he rode anger into poor decisions. Yet his escapes and captures show the same sea sense that animates the composite. In particular, a daring break through a blockade or a sudden pivot across the wind to avoid a trap are the kinds of moves that cameras love and that real sailors respected. He stands in the composite as a shadow on the edge of a brighter portrait, a reminder that raw defiance is a spice, not a stew. Blackbeard, by contrast, is a study in stagecraft. He knew that smoke could unsettle even hardened men if it turned a human face into an omen. He knew that a blockade could break will without breaking wood. He knew that a terrifying legend could save powder by making a fight end before it began. The films understand him well. They bring him directly into later stories, and even earlier, they borrow his principle. The composite Jack's charm is a sibling to Blackbeard's menace. Both are theater, and both are practical, because stories about pirates are often loud. It is useful to pause and remember how the trickster captain archetype congealed in print. Sailors told stories to each other first. A few reached shore, where pamphlet writers, hungry for sales, smoothed edges or sharpened them for effect. Newspapers printed quick reports under pressure. Courtrooms recorded longer statements under different kinds of pressure. A handful of early historians tried to assemble coherent narratives from mixed ingredients. Over decades, a template formed. It featured a captain who laughed at danger, codes that read like club rules, and havens that felt like home to any wandering soul. When a modern film draws lines from that template, it is drinking from a well that others topped up for a century. Ports return as characters. Tortuga, with its rough charm, welcomed both business and relief. Repairs, meals, music, and the chance to build a crew from strangers. Port Royal, bright with trade before disaster, served as a market as well as a moral symbol for later writers who wanted to argue that vice brings ruin. Nassau for a time became a republic in practice, if not in law. A place where captains talked across tables without uniforms to signal rank, and where a governor named Woodes Rogers eventually arrived with pardons and resolved to restore order. Across the sea, Algiers, Tunis, and other Corsair cities provided structures that felt familiar to a captain from the Atlantic, with different languages and rules but the same basic dance: protection in exchange for utility. A composite like Jack Sparrow moves through these places like a practiced actor moving through sets, recognizing in each one which door opens with a wink and which with a coin. Now the props on the table deserve the camera's attention. A compass becomes a character not because it spins toward magic, but because it stands for choice. A flag tells a story in a single glance. A plain black banner could suggest mercy if a ship surrendered swiftly. A red flag could promise no quarter. Pistols were valued despite their unreliability, because a single shot fired at the right moment could change a negotiation more than 10 minutes of argument. Cutlasses were not dainty dueling blades but workman's tools designed to slash in close quarters where a long sword snagged on rigging. Coats, hats, and beads were more than costume. They were a captain's press kit, delivered live to every deck he stepped on. In the films, the Black Pearl's darkness is color correction for a feeling. Viewers can feel what sailors felt when a ship seemed to collaborate in their luck. Sailor folklore comes next. Afloat on a tide of practicality. Omens, birds landing on a yard, a strange glow at the masthead, the sudden silence of waves, helped seafarers name uncertainty. Tales of cursed gold added ceremony to caution. A crew more likely to respect a taboo might avoid stirring trouble in a place where locals guarded graves with teeth and stories. Both the films exaggerate this into monsters and bargains with sea spirits, but the seed is human. When life feels small under a big sky, a story grows to fit the size of the view. Law chased pirates with rules, as old as empires, and as new as last week's proclamation. Admiralty courts handled cases without juries, believing themselves better suited to technical matters of sea law. Informants traded safety for testimony. Pardons were bait and policy at once. Governments measured whether it was wiser to hang 100 men or forgive 200 and fragment the rest. Executions were not only punishments, they were public lessons. Prints sold in markets made examples portable. The game forced leaders into flexibility. A captain who could read when to accept a pardon and when to treat it as a trap had a better chance of seeing another spring. The thread of women at sea takes on warmth when told without any need for shock. Anne Bonny and Mary Read fought, spoke, and suffered as shipmates. Their stories cut through lazy assumptions and remind a listener that crews trained by necessity valued ability. Disguises appear in accounts because social expectations made work easier in men's clothing. But the work was the same: hauling, fighting, navigating, watching. The legal system reacted unpredictably, sometimes granting stays for pregnancy, sometimes increasing attention. In the films, Elizabeth Swann's ark runs through fine rooms and open water and lands on the same shore. Roles are tools, courage is the engine. Money clarifies motives. A captured cargo of sugar became coin through merchants who knew how to launder goods with documentation, claims of salvage, or simple quiet. Dyewoods, spices, and textiles each had networks of buyers. Gold and silver glittered in stories, but provisions and textiles paid for sales and medical care. Privateering in wartime gave a legal frame and sometimes a patriotic halo to behavior indistinguishable from theft. To the victims, peacetime removed the halo and left a habit. An opportunistic diplomat learned to become a privateer on paper when possible, then shade into piracy when the wind shifted. In the films, backroom deals and member-only rooms capture that gradient with small but telling details. A ring left on a contract, a nod shared between a clerk and a captain. Iconic movie moments invite slow, friendly comparison. Consider the oft-quoted parley. On screen, the term lands like a spell, halting action and forcing a talk. In life, flags of truce and negotiated pauses existed, and they mattered. A promise of safety, given under a white flag, could save lives and cargo. But parley was not an unbreakable charm. It was a practical tool respected most when both sides believed they might need it again next week. Another image: the captain marooned on a beach, who returns by improbable means. Real marooning occurred, sometimes with a jug of water and a pistol, and escapes happened through luck, currents, makeshift rafts, or rescue by islanders or passing craft. The film's polished miracle wraps 1,000 small miracles lived by real men who knew the color of every cloud. The famous compass that does not point north sits comfortably as metaphor beside the documented skill of leaders who understood what their enemies and allies wanted and guided events toward those wants. One more: a council of pirates in a hidden harbor filled with ships from every corner of the world. Though no single gathering reached that level of operatic spectacle, informal councils, alliances, and shared havens were real. Information traveled via gossip, and a sort of letter that avoided names and a respected captain's opinion could shift plans across more than one deck. The legacy loop hums quietly in the background. While all this plays, a successful film sparks museum exhibits. Exhibits draw visitors who then support historians and curators. Those historians refine labels and write guides that teachers use. Teachers shape the next generation's sense of the sea. Tours of old forts adopt new scripts. A loop between culture and history spins like a capstan, slow but strong. A verdict framework assigns simple weights without numbers, because the goal is clarity, not math. Name, congruence, and temporal fit matter. Ward's Jack, Rackham's Jack, Roberts' era. Every's famous strike, Blackbeard's theater. Personality and performance matter. Ward's charm, Rackham's fashion, Roberts' order. Every's ghosting, Blackbeard's fearcraft. Career arcs matter. Who reinvented, who burned out, who wrote rules. Tactics matter. Speed, deception, alliance building. Relationships with power matter. Pardons taken, pardons refused. Deals struck with governors or corsair rulers. Myth afterlife matters. Who lived on in pamphlets and classrooms. On this grid, Ward leads with cross-cultural reinvention and the right name. Rackham and Roberts anchor style and governance. Every and Blackbeard provide the mythic edges. Now the verdict can be revisited without hurry and with detail promised earlier. There was not one real Jack Sparrow. There was a pattern made from several lives. Jack Ward stands as the primary pillar. The Jack who changed nations without changing his essence, whose charisma and bargaining made danger feel manageable, whose move to North Africa mirrors the character's ability to go places where law bends. Calico Jack and Black Bart Roberts contribute the next strongest lines. The wardrobe that communicates a message before words and the code that makes liberty sustainable. Henry Every contributes the vanishing trick after a breathtaking heist, the lingering echo of a captain gone with the wind while rumors feed fires in far palaces. Blackbeard contributes the knowledge that theater controls outcomes, whether by smoke in a beard or by a grin in a tavern. The films capture this truth. A captain survives by mastering people, papers and place as much as sails and guns. The films invent the supernatural engines and compressing timelines that make a human century look like one wild decade in the life of one man who never tears his coat. Because curiosity always produces new little questions. A second round of short answers flows in a gentle rhythm. Did pirates truly vote on everything? Crews voted on captains and big decisions more often than on small daily tasks. A ship cannot move if every rope requires a ballot. Did a captain own the ship? Sometimes. Often the ship was captured, shared, or effectively owned by the crew through their articles. Was mutiny frequent? Disputes happened. But articles and share systems were designed to prevent mutiny by giving everyone a stake. Did every pirate have a parrot? No. Parrots appear in art and stories more than in reliable logs. Did pirates sleep in hammocks? Often yes, because hammocks saved space and moved with the ship. Did pirates bathe? Whenever possible. Cleanliness protected health and saltwater scrubs were common. Did pirates love music? Songs and fiddles appear in accounts, but long days of hard work tempered celebrations. Did pirates fear dead calm more than storms? Many did, because stillness could mean days of thirst and fruitless waiting, while food and water ran down. Where to Learn More comes next as a friendly nudge, rather than a homework list. Trial records from Admiralty courts reveal wording that sounds like the deck itself is speaking. Early histories collect names and arcs that help a listener tie faces to events. Sailor narratives, some plain, some embroidered, carry the smell of tar and the crackle of dry biscuit. A reader can search for the names heard tonight and find credible summaries that keep the drama but lower the noise. The night now gives a wide, restful view, and the epilogue arrives with the same easy tone that began this voyage. The truth behind Jack Sparrow is a mosaic. He is made of Jack Ward's reinventions, Calico Jack's signal bright clothing and fateful circle, Black Bart's orderly liberty, Henry Every's echoing heist and disappearance, and Blackbeard's stage-managed fear. Around those pieces, the currents of empires, companies, and courts ran steady. The films distilled this into a captain who makes danger look like a joke and fortune look like a choice. The real lesson is quieter. Performance keeps a crew calm, order makes freedom last, and understanding people is the best compass a sailor can carry. The lantern in the cabin still sways, the chart is still open. Somewhere a clerk still stamps a paper that changes a voyage. Somewhere else, a sailor hums a tune that another sailor will call a shanty a century later. The sea stays wide enough to hold all of it. The theater, the law, the laugh, and the long patience of those who earned their living between wind and water. Sleep can take over easily now, and the final image can be kind. A small ship moves at 6 knots under an evening sky. On deck, a quiet captain lifts a coat collar against the cool. The crew trusts the rhythm of watches. A port ahead glimmers with candles, and the low murmur of trade, whether he is called Ward, or Rackham, or Roberts, or something else entirely, The figure at the rail belongs to the same tradition. He reads people, he reads the weather, and he reads the moment when to smile and shake a hand. That is the answer to the question that started the night. There was not one real Jack Sparrow. There were several, and together they still sail. Hey, pirate fans around the world. This is Was There a Real Jack Sparrow? Jack Sparrow, from Pirates of the Caribbean, feels too specific to be pure invention, and that is the point of departure. The question is simple. Who were the real seafarers whose lives, habits, and legends fed the creation of a captain who jokes his way out of danger and slips through the fingers of empires? Viewers are about to hear the candidates, the evidence, what the films captured, what they stretched, and a clear verdict at the end. This is not trivia. It changes how the golden age of piracy is understood, because it reveals the pattern beneath the stories, how charm, law, commerce, and survival braided together on the open sea. Before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really enjoy and want to fall asleep with pirate stories whenever you want. A shrewd, rum-charmed trickster captain didn't spring from Hollywood. He's a composite of real pirates. And tonight we'll prove how the legends map onto history. To make things clear early, here is a fast map that ties film traits to historical counterparts and hints at where proof lives. Trickster leadership, seen whenever the movie captain wins without firing a shot. Links to commanders who preferred misdirection over open battle. Their proof rests in depositions, letters, and early histories describing smooth talk, surprise, and sudden defections. Mutiny, survival, and the art of the comeback point to captains who lost ships or crews, then returned with new names or alliances. Sartorial flair, beads, bright coats, a hat chosen as much for theater as for shade, relates to pirates whose look was part of their tactics, intimidating enemies or boosting morale. Democratic crews and coded rules appear again and again in ship articles from the era, and will be shown in plain language. Opportunistic alliances, brief moments where a pirate becomes a privateer or works with a governor, sit-in pardons, proclamations, and court testimony. With that map in mind, comparisons to Tortuga barroom chaos, parley scenes in candlelit rooms, crew votes on deck, and the smoky council at Shipwreck Cove will land with clarity. The big question comes first, and the plan is straightforward. A real Jack Sparrow is not one man. It is a repeating shape, a captain who wins with wit more than with cannon, who treats luck like a tool, and who negotiates with governors while stealing their ships. The method is simple and calm. First, profiles will be laid out for the strongest historical contenders. Next, their traits will be matched to moments in the films. The compass that does not point north, the showman's swagger, the sideways deals with officials, the slippery escapes through crowded ports. Finally, those traits will be weighed with sources and a verdict will be reached. One primary inspiration, two strong secondary contributors, and a handful of traits borrowed from others. Step by step, the mask will come off the character so the real faces behind it can be seen. The first strong candidate steps onto the stage. Jack Ward, also known as John Ward, and later as Yusuf Race, after a dramatic turn in North Africa. The name Jack itself rings like a bell for the film character, but it is more than coincidence. Ward developed a reputation for sudden moves and daring thefts, quick strikes that made observers describe him as cunning rather than simply violent. The story opens on the coasts of the late 16th and early 17th centuries, where he cut his teeth as a privateer and then crossed a line into full piracy. Ward did not always rely on brute force. He was known for taking vessels with clever timing and for reinventing himself when pressure rose. Contemporary accounts give him a showman's glow, and later pamphlets amplified it until he resembled an almost mythical rogue. Importantly, Ward's life included cross-cultural dealings after he reached North Africa and took a new name. That ability to shift identities and operate in more than one world mirrors the film captain's slippery diplomacy. One moment bargaining with a governor, the next raising a toast in a foreign port where the law's hand grows soft at night. Viewers can picture the vibe. The camera glides across a harbor lit by lanterns. A captain who looks like the sea itself has adopted him, walks past a row of traders, and the negotiation begins before anyone speaks. Jack Ward's origin story shows the loop between war and piracy. Many pirates began with legal permission, letters of marque, allowing them to harass enemy ships during conflict. When those letters expired, or terms grew strict, some kept the habit and lost the paperwork. Ward's biggest coups involved capturing well-armed vessels, then using them to expand his reach. Each success attracted talent. Each new crew brought new complications. Ward's legend was magnified by enemies who needed a villain for their readers, and by admirers who loved a stylish rule breaker. When the films showed a captain making friends in the unlikeliest corners of the map, or speaking softly while the plan clicked into place, they echoed the Ward line: charm as a tactic, identity as a costume, and local relationships as a net stronger than rope. A third candidate arrives with a different energy: Bartholomew Roberts, called Black Bart. He fits because he blended charisma with discipline and ran ships by a code. He raided with audacity, and yet he looked like a gentleman who might have worn lace to church. Roberts made a craft of performance, but he did not confuse charm with chaos. On his vessels, rules were clear, articles were accepted by crews, and the share system, how loot was split, gave order to the risk everyone took. The code punished theft among shipmates, protected rest time, and spelled out compensation for injury. In short, he made liberty livable. Roberts' death became legend. A cannon shot ended him, and his crew honored him even as they lost control. In the films, when the pirate code is spoken of with reverence and humor, when a captain holds a council or asks for a vote, the trail leads back to Roberts and others like him, who were both performers and administrators of floating societies. The second candidate is Calico Jack Rackham. He matters for simple reasons that even a child could hold on to. His nickname Calico came from his clothing. He liked flair. He captained small, quick ships that relied on agility. His story tangled with two names that light up pirate history: Anne Bonny and Mary Ridd, partners whose presence on deck unsettled rigid expectations of the time. Rackham's rise involved opportunism and daring, but his captures were not always grand set-piece battles. They were moves by a fox rather than a bear. His downfall came after a series of risky decisions, proof that style can boost courage, but cannot hold back a storm forever. As for iconography, his flag, often shown as a skull over two crossed cutlasses, teaches how branding worked before the term existed. It was a message made of cloth: surrender now, avoid a fight. When the films dress their captain with ornaments and give him lines that turn danger into theater, they tap the Rackham vein. The outlaw lovers who banner across decks find a mirror in Rackham's circle. The wardrobe that says, "I am not a gray sailor in a gray world," reflects the same choice fashion as signal and shield.